So here we are in episode 4, maybe, of our podcast. And finally, I get madam. I think I've been asking you for like 2 years now. Not that my podcast materialized until recently, but I'm very excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so for those who don't know Deepika, I don't know what stone you've been sleeping under, but I think most people know Deepika. And Deepika Mehta, born and raised in India. So I actually invited Deepika here, and we have no script. We don't really know what we're going to talk about, but I'm going to wing it. And I'm really curious about your story because I realized I don't know anything about you. I don't know, where you grew. I know you're from Hyderabad, but I don't know. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah. So my dad was in a job which required a lot of travel. So I was born in Calcutta. Then I was in the south of India in a place called Vishakhapatnam. It's a very small town. My dad was the head of a company, and it was like in the middle of nowhere where we were living. And then he retired, my dad, at 40. He was pretty radical for an Indian. He just wanted to relax, and he'd work very, very hard. He was from a very small town. He made it really, my dad is pretty amazing. He made it from like nothing to being very successful. And so at 40 he decided to retire, and we moved to a place called Hyderabad, which is a big Indian city. So I spent a lot of years in Hyderabad, but then I went to a boarding school in the mountains in India later on when I was in class 9 or 8, I can't remember now. And that really was one of the turning points of my life, because Hyderabad was it's a big city. It's a very big city, but like with big cities where you're quite entitled, you can get into an entitled lifestyle even if you're very young. And I guess even back then, even though I was very young, I always had this urge to want to grow and not be in a fish pond, literally. So I wanted to like get out of that, even though it was quite easy to feel like a queen, even though you're very young, but still, like, it was a very entitled lifestyle, I feel now when I look back. So a part of me wanted to grow, and so I really wanted to go to this boarding school, which was like an all girls boarding school. It was a very, I wouldn't use the word elite, but it was very
Prestige?
kind of, yeah. But the best thing about it was, like, everybody I met from there was, it was not just about academics. There was a lot of other things that were focused on. So I went to this boarding school, all girls. It was very difficult for me because I had led a very sheltered life, and I was very attached to my mom. And then suddenly to go to a boarding school and to start all over again. But it really forced me to get into sports, because everybody in that school, all the girls were very good at something. And so if you wanted to make friends, you had to be good at something.
Okay.
And I was really shit at everything. I mean, I was good at academics. I was actually pretty good at academics, but it didn't cut it to make friends.
Okay.
So I had to
That was too nerdy.
Yeah, it was too nerdy. You wouldn't make the right friends. I was like, okay, let me try to make the right friends. So, like, my friends
Didn't want to be in the chess club.
No, I didn't. No. And I was not good enough to be in the chess club, to be honest. So then I just kind of, it was a boarding school, right? So all the girls in my dormitory were part of like a trekking kind of club. So I joined this. But the part of the trekking club was to run every morning 6 or 7 kilometers.
Wow.
And I remember the first time I did this run, I think I reached maybe 45 minutes after everybody else, because they were all really, very athletic. The level of athletic, fitness was very high. And so then, it started from there. And then I really got into trekking. I got into athletics. I got a part of this trekking club. I finally, did a lot of mountaineering and trekking, and I made some amazing friends who were a huge influencing factor in my life, because they were all about growth. And one of my friends lives in Spiti in India, and she's like a mountaineer. She's like a very top mountaineer. And so I think that all of them rubbed off on me. And so then that just kind of set something off in my life, I feel. Then I went to Delhi for college. And again, it was a similar theme because I was in a, I was staying with a bunch of girls who were from all over India, a lot from the Northeast. And again, they were all very cool in the sense of like they were not into fashion and boys, but they were all like musicians or, they were all radical with a lot of personality. And again, I've always been the kind of person who absorbs a lot from people around me. And I've always liked learning from people. And, I like to just take in as much as I can. I think it's something very natural. So again, it was like they were a huge influencing factor on me. I got into music, but I continued trekking and stuff like that. Yeah, so I did this mountaineering course and I got very inspired and I went rock climbing on my own and I had a fall. I fell from 40 feet. That left me out of action for, I would say, at least 2 years. I had to move. I mean, firstly, I was in a hospital for a very long time. I had lots of surgeries, my arm, my ankle, and in my neck. My ankle was the one that still has impacted me. I have arthritis on my ankle. My arm recovered pretty good, even though I had like 2 plates and maybe 50 screws in here. But this, because it's not so weight bearing, it recovered pretty fast. But my ankle had a lot of damage. So I still can't do a lot of things, and I guess I still have a lot of fear from that fall. But it really sparked something in my life because number one, I went into a very deep when I look back now, I would say I was depressed because I was like suddenly, from college with all my friends, really exciting life. Used to go out a lot, and I was like had like lots of beautiful friends. And I wanted to do economic honors and all of that. And I was in my 3rd year of college, and then having to come back, be with my parents, not have anybody I could connect with around, and just that kind of loneliness. It really took me into a pretty dark space. And I was told, and this was back in India in 25 years back, so the doctors were like, you might walk again. Now when I look back, I don't think it would have been so radical because there's a lot of healing modalities, great physiotherapists, all of that. But back then in India, I think it was not so progressive. So like my doctor said, yeah, you'll just walk. And I wanted to dance and I wanted to hike and I wanted to do mountaineering. I wanted to do base Everest that year, and I had so many plans. And so that like left me very deeply hopeless. And in that time, I got attracted to pranic healing. And then I found this book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And then that led me to a whole journey of healing, which eventually led me to yoga.
So I have a question. When you said, like you went into a depression, obviously it's very natural to imagine that would happen, right? But when you went into that space, what was it that sort of you would say you learned the most out of that? Like if you look back, hindsight, okay, we always say, oh, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, what was it in that space that you feel?
I mean, in retrospect, it happened for a reason. I wouldn't have been the person I am today, for sure, if that had not happened. I was quite happy in my bubble of going to nightclubs and partying with my friends. And, of course, I was always, even when I was 5 or 6 years old, I've always had this yearning for God. But of course, there was nothing had taken me into the depth. Whereas this really took me into the depths of hopelessness. And I think it taught me, now when I look back, that the 2 years after my accident to the time when I finally, or maybe 3 years or whatever, that I finally got to doing yoga and walking and whatever, was totally much better, was a deep, Now when I look back, and with social media and all of that, there's so much going on, right? But now when I look back, it was like that time I got possessed with just this idea that I'm going to heal myself. I was like possessed. Like I would be like, I am going to heal myself no matter what anybody says to me. And there was not enough information. There was no internet. Like there was no access to information, which sometimes is a good thing because you are just forced to depend on your own faculties of healing.
So now I have another question. When you say that you got possessed by healing, so as witches,
Yeah.
what tools were you using? Would you then like visualize it, or would you more sort of seek information to learn more about how to heal yourself? Or was
Yeah.
it more, you had a role model?
Yeah.
Or
No, none of that.
none?
There was like,
Okay.
firstly, I'm not a very intellectual person. I leave that to my husband. I'm not an intellectual person. I think I have a lot of intuition, and I feel like God is on my side. It sounds very naive, but I've always believed this.
So that was what happened.
Yeah,
in that
I just
time.
firstly I read that book, Autobiography of a Yogi, and there was a lot of miracles in it. There was also a parallel thing happening where I had just started getting into jazz ballet just before my accident. So even though I was on the bed with a big cast on my left arm, big cast on my left leg, and a cast here, I would still, this is maybe a few months after, I would still be sitting in bed and trying to move. So there was this deep urge and determination to move, number one, because I had so much energy. I had to move to kind of just stay sane. Secondly, was just like this deep belief that I'm going to heal myself. Like I was not seeking information. It was just so naive. When I look back, it was just like, like a child. Not seeking information or anything, but just from sheer determination and willpower. And then I remember finally, when I did start walking with a crutch, every day I would walk I had a notebook where I would write how many steps I took. And then I would just walk, like even if it was 5 steps, I would write down. So it was just like this determination that I'm going to walk and I'm going to be fine. And a few, maybe, my timeline is a bit confused right now because it was so many years back. But there was one time where in India, there's a pilgrimage spot called Tirupati. It's like where Lord Balaji is supposed to reside. And a lot of Indians do this as a pilgrimage. And my whole family, I was still on a wheelchair at this point, and my family and a lot of our family friends and people were going to Tirupati, and my mom, dad, everybody were going, and they were like, so you have 2 ways of going up to the temple. One is you do a walk all the way up, which is a long walk, it's like a pilgrimage. And one is people just get in a car, all the rich people get in a car and they reach on top in the car. And I told everybody, I was like, I'm going to walk.
Wow.
And I still at this point had a massive cast on. My dad and everybody was like, there's no way you're going to walk. And I said, I will show you, I will walk.
Wow.
I don't care what you guys say, I'm going to walk. So I walked up in 1.5 hours with a crutch. Even today, if I go to walk, I'll take 2 hours.
No way.
I promise you. It was like possessed. I was possessed by something. And it was like, and when you walk up Tirupati, you see people like this because everybody's come there praying for something. And you see people, there are people amputated. There are people rolling and going up. There was that kind of, and India is like that, India is that part of India, which I think you love. There's this kind of zeal, right? And that's the part of India that I love as well, like where there's this faith and God and surrender. But it's not a passive surrender.
No. It's a surrender, trusting that you're being taken care of.
But at the same time, it's a very, you're like, I don't know whether it's God giving you the energy, but you're also very empowered. In the surrender, there's a power. And I really felt that power. I felt like God was just there with me, it was just like, so, I mean, from there on, I just, with my crutch, I'd just be walking like a possessed person, and I did a lot of things like this. I had a lot of mystical experiences. Now when I go look back, I don't know if they were real, in the sense of, you know, the India is also filled with a lot of people trying to get money out of you. But I believe they were all true. So my parents have a house also in the mountains in India, in a place called Dehradun. And so, like maybe a few years after maybe a year after the accident, my parents took me there because they were like, could still sense I was very lonely, and, you know, they wanted me to just start feeling happy again, and I love the mountains, so they took me there. And I remember even there I'd be walking with my crutch, and I remember one day outside, and Dehradun is very close to Rishikesh, it's in Uttarakhand. And I remember outside our house there was a like a sadhu with ash sitting outside the house.
Was he naked?
No, he was wearing some clothes. He was not naked. He was wearing some clothes.
I saw sadhu in ashes, naked in Rishikesh.
Yeah.
So like,
but you know, this is Dehradun. Dehradun is still quite a...
Yeah, it's very sophisticated.
It is sophisticated. I mean, back then it was like kind of very simple, but still, it's not like Rishikesh. So you don't really expect to see sadhus outside your house. So I remember this sadhu was like saying something, and I walked out, I mean, with the crutch or whatever. And he said to me that you always want something, but you're never able to get what you want, even though you really want it desperately. So I said, okay. Then he was like, then he started saying things which are pretty obvious, like, you're a young person, you're broken. He's like, you're feeling depressed. I mean, these are not like, don't have to be a shrink. I mean, you can just figure this out, right? Then he's
let
like,
me look into my crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly. Then he's like, what is it that you want the most? He asked me this question. And at that point, I was in love with this guy. I hope he's not watching this podcast, but I was in love with this rock star, who was a very famous rock star in India.
No names? Or...
and if he watches this, it'll be embarrassing. But so I'm
sure he'd be really flattered. How can it be embarrassing? I mean, who wouldn't be flattered by Deepika had a crush on them?
I mean, I was kind of seeing him, but then he had moved on and whatever. So anyway, I was kind of obsessed with him at this point.
Okay.
And so this guy asked me, like, what is it that you want the most? I'm going to manifest this something and you're going to get this thing.
The sadhu said.
Yeah, the sadhu said. And even in that moment, you know, like at 21 or whatever, most people be like, oh yeah, I want this guy. But I just said, I just want peace. It was quite crazy. I mean, that's not something that you at that age think you want, but that's what I wanted. Like, it was just instinctive in me. Later on, I was like, oh, I should have asked for the guy.
Or to be back running again.
Yeah. No, I just asked for peace. And he just asked me to pluck a flower, and I put it in my hand, and then he said something, and then when I opened my hand, that flower had become a tabiz.
A what?
A tabiz. A tabiz is like this Indian amulet.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
you know, with ash inside.
Yeah.
So in my hand, that flower had become a tabiz.
Wow.
I mean, that guy could be a magician.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But you know, things like that started happening. A lot of mystical experiences.
Wasn't Sai Baba famous for that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a bunch of things started happening like that, and then eventually I found, you know, Ashtanga and yoga, and then that whole happening happened.
Okay. So I want to go back to determination. So when you say that you were so determined, and I would say you still are.
I still am.
Yes. And how do you feel that it served you, maybe, like, you know, it served you then? Like, what other points of your life have you had to pull out this determination tool and go, okay, let's go?
I mean, my life is filled with that. I don't know if God, you know, whether that's maybe, you know, I don't know about karma and all of that. I mean, I'm still understanding all of that, but I wonder, like, if it happens to everybody, but I do have a lot of challenges that keep coming up in my life. I don't know if God's trying to teach me a lesson, or if that muscle of determination is just meant to get so strong. Because I had a lot of recurring themes of that kind of intense challenges in my life. Few years later, I was married to my childhood sweetheart,
Ooh, I
who
didn't know
was my
that.
best friend, who became my like soulmate during my whole accident time. And he was, I still get emotional about this because I haven't really talked about it. So he was my sweetheart, and he loved me since I was in class 9. And finally we got like, I kind of liked him, but I was not into him. But eventually, after the accident and, him being there for me, and I felt like he really understood my spirit, we ended up like seeing each other, and then we got married. And then a few years after that, he broke my heart in the worst way possible. I mean, like, this is another thing that life has taught me, is like, you can't blame another person. You can't. That's just life. So for a long time I hated him because of he cheated on me. So for a long time I hated him for that. But now when I look back in retrospect, I understand. I mean, he's still a good friend of mine now. But I look back and I realize that's just life. It's not that he intended to do this to me. It just happened. That's how it played out. We were kids. We didn't understand what marriage means.
How old were you when you
I
got
was
married?
just maybe 24.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it's like it really, it just, I don't have that much judgment anymore, because it taught me that this person didn't intend to do this. It just so happened we grew in different directions. I just was on this whole path of yoga, like desperately seeking, going to ashrams. I went to the Shivananda ashram, and after getting married, and so there was this part of me that was going in that direction. And of course I was away from him for so many years, like months, that it just took us in different directions. And so, it just happened. He was a young guy. Anyway, so my heart was broken in a million pieces, not to mention the public humiliation, because it was everybody got to know about it and blah, blah, blah. Not that didn't matter to me so much at that point in my life. It was more just deep heartache and loss of trust, that deep feeling of not knowing if you can trust another person, especially, I mean, a man. So again, I had to pull out that deep determination. But then God is always on your side, because he gives you these setbacks. And I remember, again, second time in my life, I was in deep depression in Hyderabad, because I was going to get separated and divorced from this man that I had loved a lot. And at that time there was no mobile phones and no email, whatever. By this time I had started teaching a little bit in Bombay, and I had gotten quite famous. I had been written about in magazines, etc., etc., because I was quite radical in that, being quite modern, teaching Ashtanga in Bombay. A lot of celebrities you know kind of were attracted to that. I was written about in newspapers, blah blah blah.
If Madonna does it, then
Yeah, exactly. It was a whole Madonna, and then so everybody wanted to do it, kind of thing. But then, so I came back to Hyderabad because of the separation and everything. And out of the blue, my mom gets a call on her phone, and it was one of the most famous directors and producers in India. His name is Aditya Roy Chopra. Aditya Chopra. I've forgotten the name. Aditya Chopra. And he wanted me to train Aishwarya Rai. You know who Aishwarya Rai is?
no.
The most famous Indian actress ever.
Well, you ask me about any famous actor ever, anywhere. I don't know.
Okay, so she was Miss Universe or Miss World or something.
wow.
Anyway, she was the most famous Indian actress, the most
wow.
famous global Indian actress.
I'm sure I know when I see her face.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of Indian movies.
She's gorgeous, like the most famous Indian actress ever.
Yeah.
So he wanted me to be her personal trainer for a film.
Wow.
So they flew me. This is me lying depressed for months, and then suddenly my mom gets this call. They're like, we're trying to find Deepika. Can she come to Bombay for a day? We need to meet her. So they flew me business class to go meet Aishwarya Rai. And from then on, I was her personal trainer for 2 years or 1.5 years for a film called Dhoom 2, where she had to have this massive transformation and she had to look like $1 million. But they wanted her to look like a dancer, not like big, like they wanted her to have like a yoga body. lean and flexible and whatever. So anyway, so I was her personal trainer for 2 years, 1.5 years, traveling with her to London and this and that. And suddenly it was like back to this kind of like high.
Yeah.
And so, then after that, I moved to Bombay, and for a long time, I was teaching, training a lot of famous Bollywood actresses. And it was a complete change of direction and like the biggest high. A lot of fame and like famous people around and whatever, the glitz of Bombay. So yeah, well, I went into that deep dark hole, and then God gave me a massive high after that. So yeah, that was another time in my life.
You had different scenarios in your life where you've been up in the mountains, hanging out with the girls. Now you're in Bollywood, hanging out with the stars, living the high life.
Yeah.
And was it difficult to be this sort of yoga guru and being in this like bling bling world? Because as we know, that's like party and a lot of...
I've always just been quite honest, and I'm quite authentic. I think I think people like that. Even very famous people like it when somebody is very real. So, I remember I would just wear chappals. I've never owned a pair of high heels. I'd go for parties wearing rags and just my Indian bohemian style and, with all my stuff. And so I've always been that person. And I think even very famous, very rich people are attracted to that when you have this kind of individuality. So I don't feel like I had to change myself. And I've never done drugs. I've never been attracted to alcohol. I guess I've always got that high from dancing, and I've always liked that. So I don't think it. Of course, the fame and all of that makes you quite. I don't think even that didn't get me arrogant, but it was exciting. But I don't think I got carried away. For sure, I think I was still quite steady. Of course, there was the high of other things, like lots of.
Like what?
Like hot men chasing you, especially when you felt really rejected by the most man that you loved, and that kind of high again. It's a bit of a high. But anyway, so
that's always a good balm for the heart.
Yeah,
right?
You feel happy. Yeah, but I guess by then I'd kind of realized I need to not be too vulnerable too easily. So there was a part of me that got very guarded. Till Mark Roberts came along.
Okay. And well, that took a long time before
that
got concluded.
It took a long time. Yeah,
I remember. I was kind of starting to get to know you then, or we met. We didn't really know each other, but I remember it was like on and then. But where is Deepika? Oh no, she's somewhere.
We still had like a lot of other karmas with other people to finish before we got together.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So you met Mark after the Bombay high life?
Yeah, like I met him in Goa. So like I said, I've always had, the two sides. There was the Bombay stuff, and I would get offers. I did a television show. But then I was always very attracted to the whole yoga thing again. So it was a recurring theme where I would go off for a while.
But wait a minute, what were you doing in the TV show? You were acting or?
No, so I was part of a few different TV shows. One was a reality show.
Okay.
Which was about me. I was I was the trainer. It was the copy of this famous American show called Biggest Loser.
Okay.
I'm sure you don't have any clue.
No.
Anyway, it was like reality. It was pretty cheesy. It was a reality show where it was two teams, and then there was one team, basically like who lost the maximum weight at the end of the period, and everybody there was really obese.
Okay.
So I was the trainer for one team, and there was a guy who was the trainer for the other team, and I was using fitness and yoga. So my team won at the end of it. Yes. Again, a lot of determination went in there. A lot of motivation skills.
Yeah.
There was a pivoting moment even there where it was like the script required me to be really mean and kind of like a bit bitchy. Yeah, like that. But as I was trying that out with the teammates, they were really hating me. Didn't work. So I remember this guy said on camera that he wants to pick up a dumbbell and throw it on my face.
Wow.
But then that was the script.
Mhm.
And then I just changed the vibe to becoming who I really am because I realized it's not working. So I then became much more compassionate and empathetic and understanding why these people so fat. I mean, obese. Like in the sense of trying to understand their
the
psychology.
struggle.
Yeah. And understanding them and understanding their perspective. And then when I became like that, much more empathetic, much more understanding and more motivating instead of like being mean. More feminine actually. They just started trusting me big time, and it was like I suddenly became like their mom or something like that. And at the end they won. And I remember the same guy who had said I'm going to throw a dumbbell on her face, he said on camera, he's like, she's my guru. If she asks me to jump from whatever floor, I'll do that.
I'm getting goosebumps.
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Wow, you had a pretty colorful life.
I've had a very colorful life.
Not that you don't anymore.
It's still going on. The colorful
exactly.
Challenges and highs and lows are still on.
Wow. Okay, so what happened after that? So now we're done some TV shows in Bombay, and then you met Mark Roberts in Goa.
Yeah. So then I met Mark in Goa, and you know, he was very honest straight away. He was like, do you want to travel the world and teach yoga with me? This is the second time that we're hanging out at a juice bar called in Chapora, which is like this very local grunge juice bar. That was the date he took me on. Okay. But that's what I loved about him. He was very straight away upright, and like there was no games, there was no anything, there was no pretenses. He was very different from all the guys I had met. I mean, everybody, all the men I met, they've had something very, very special, but his thing was straightforward, to the point, and that was very attractive.
No beating around the
There
bush.
was no beating around the bush. And of course I was very attracted to his yoga practice. I mean, he had an incredible practice. So I had met him on my first trip to Mysore in 2001. I had seen him practicing. It was in the first shala. I was practicing with Guruji Patabi Joyce, and Mark by then had already been like, he was a star practitioner, and I was just a beginner. Yeah, I was an amazing practitioner, and I was a beginner. And I remember watching his practice and thinking, wow, this guy's flying. So when I met him again in Goa, this was maybe 10 years after.
Oh, wow. So 2011.
Yeah, 2010, 2011. He was practicing with Rolf and Marcy, and I was also practicing with them. Separate time, but we met at a cafe called Bean Me Up. So I was very attracted to that quality in him, you know, and it's crazy because I was sitting at a cafe in Goa, and I'm quite into the law of attraction. So I was reading this book called Ask and You Will Receive by Abraham and Esther Hicks.
Yeah.
And I was writing down what are the qualities I want to attract in my soulmate, not boyfriend, soulmate. And I had written that, you know, whatever qualities I had written, and that's when Mark came and started chatting with me, chatting me up basically. So I feel like I attracted him into my life. And, you know, when I saw him, instantly it felt like I've known this soul from another lifetime. When I looked into his eyes, it was not attraction like a physical attraction. It was like a deep knowing that I know this person. He's going to be an important person in my life. It was so deep, the knowing. And a lot of synchronicities happened that brought us together. And then he just changed my life. He just took me from the Bombay life into the whole wandering
the world,
beginning all over again life, actually. Because to be very honest, when I started traveling with Mark, I was just his girlfriend. You know what I mean? And he was already very, very famous in the Ashtanga world.
His little groupies.
Yeah, so he had like he was
chick.
Yeah,
showing up with a.
Yeah, it was just like the side act, you know. So again, there was a lot of having to work hard and prove myself all over again. But also there was this freedom, and I started to meet people who felt like more my tribe. That I was very attracted to this bunch of kind of bohemian, free people, very inspiring, more like equals rather than like people who are kind of like in awe of you. So again, you know, growth.
Yeah.
a lot of growth, a lot of pushing my limits and my boundaries. So Mark brought that back in my life.
I remember when I met you, I think it was the first time I met you, it was actually in Byron Bay in
Oh yeah,
2011. Yeah, when we
I
were.
remember meeting you in Bali at at Stonehouse when Mark had his birthday
Oh yeah,
party.
yeah, yeah, that too. No, we actually met briefly with when we went to practice for Dina.
Okay,
Yeah.
this I don't remember.
No, I was just nobody then.
No. I mean, also, I guess I was meeting a lot of people, and I was still an Indian who was not exposed to meeting so many Westerners.
Yeah, I know. I
So it was
know,
kind
of
of
course.
all a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So 2011, and then you started traveling around the world.
Yeah.
And how was that for you? How did that fit into
It
your
was very,
lifestyle?
there was a bit of a conflict. So there was this, I mean, to be very honest, there was this amazing high of traveling and meeting people who were very similar. Uh, Finally working on my practice, getting inspired to have, work on my practice, being surrounded by people that, that you were not in, I was not in my comfort zone. It was like I was really felt like I was growing. There was a lot of
Mm,
growth
mm.
and amazing places, food, people, a lot. But I missed being the queen.
Oh, okay.
A little bit, a little bit. I missed my Bombay entitled lifestyle
Yeah.
just a little bit, if I have to be
Once
honest.
spoiled, they're always spoiled.
Yeah. And also, it was like a little bit of out of the comfort zone. The traveling was a bit
Mm,
intense, also on just like not having, I had had a nice house in Bombay. I was kind of nesting in the
yeah,
house. I
you're
had my
uprooting.
rituals and, my own way of being. So that was a bit challenged.
Mm,
But I guess I like challenges in some
mm.
strange way.
Yeah,
So
you seem to attract them.
yeah, I seem to attract them. So I
Yeah.
stayed on with that. And, here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you're now with Mark, and obviously you got married. What year was that? 2018?
All a blur now.
A
Yeah.
little, a little?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, who knows? And and then when and where did you decide to move to Bali? Like, what was it that made
Hmm.
you come this
I think because, it was like kind of a midpoint. And Mark, I think we finally committed to living in Bali when I got pregnant. That was the point where actually I think I mean, we were kind of contemplating it, but we didn't have a solid nest. But then when I got pregnant, we were still kind of moving in and out of Bali and still traveling a bit. But then when I got pregnant, my dad was like, my father actually really pushed us. He was like, you guys need to have a base
way?
now. You need to have a house, have a base, and just settle down. So he really pushed us for that. And then eventually, that's how I think we took that committed, thing about just being here.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how does it feel to be here?
It's been a bit of a challenge, as I think you know. Uh, Now I'm beginning to really enjoy it because, I have a lot of girlfriends
Mm.
and I feel like I have a sense of support.
Mm.
But, being a first time mom, and that too a mom like pretty late in life, it comes with a lot of challenges because, you're not used to being this person who has to take care of another person. Like you've lived 40 some years on your own, being very free, and now there's a lot of like you have to think about another being,
Mm.
and not just think about them, you have to put them number one.
Mm.
uh, and my daughter has some special, like she needs a lot of attention.
Mm.
So that's been a big challenge in my life, the next challenge. And I felt a lot of a lack of support for some time, still finding my way in being a mother and yet being true to who I am, that struggle of those two. Now I feel like I'm kind of finding my balance with it. It's still, there's still a bit of this, a bit of that, but I feel like, I mean, I'm in love with my daughter.
Mm.
That's the only thing that love is just so deep now that that's just made it all easy. That the love is just Just, even if I'm struggling, even if I'm having a bad day, when I see her and she gives me a kiss and a cuddle, and she's very affectionate. When she just gives me a kiss and a cuddle, and she just gives me this big, like, she's very, very present with her eyes when she gives me a cuddle and a kiss and she looks into my eyes. The moments of presence are so deep that I forget everything else. So I feel like now I'm beginning to enjoy Bali a lot, and I'm feeling grateful that, again, there's a sense of freedom here. And I think the freedom comes from not taking yourself too seriously. I feel like if I was in India, I would have a little bit more of an ego, because people would make you feel like a bit of a big deal, whereas here nobody gives a shit.
Here we just whoever.
No, that's how it is.
Yeah.
So it's like, because you're not in your, like, whatever the word is, your home, like, whatever. I feel like that is the most when you just stay humble. I don't mean to come out in a wrong way, but when you stay, like, a little bit not taking yourself too seriously is where the growth is, where the freedom is.
Of course.
And we're all seeking freedom at some deep level. We've all, like, that's why we're attracted to yoga and Ashtanga, I guess. A part of us is craving that freedom, and I think I feel that in Bali.
So then my question would be, what does freedom mean to you?
I think to be who you want to be without having too much identification with just one aspect. I mean, I'm just thinking and speaking. So not just taking yourself seriously as a yoga teacher all the time, which can come with a lot of not having roles to define you, like, I'm not just an Indian woman who's a mother, who's a yoga teacher. Like, here I get, especially because I hang out with girls, women like you, like a bunch of friends, all the girls are very radical, I would say. So it's like you're not defined by just being a yoga teacher or being a mom or doing a certain yoga pose, or none of that matters, right? Like when you with other people who are very free. And I think I've craved that my whole life. And the other thing that it's not so important is what clothes you wear, what bags you carry, what jewelry you wear, what car you in, which part of, I mean, there is a bit of that. If I was living in India, I feel like I could have easily got caught in that. And here in Bali, I don't identify. I mean, most of us walk barefoot. I don't really buy too many clothes. I wear the same clothes. I don't feel the need to have to keep buying things. And there's, we're not surrounded by people who do that. So I feel lucky that I kept going with that.
Yeah.
And also bringing up our daughter the way we want, not sticking to conforming to a certain way of bringing her up. So I think that freedom is
alternative.
Yeah, very alternative.
So we did go on a little experience together recently. We were up in the mountains in Tabanan, and we had the amazing Deva doing her magic.
Yeah.
And after, because obviously we were all in our own space during this ceremony, I would say. And then afterwards, you told me that you had a Kundalini experience.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to know more about that. I mean, of course, I've heard about Kundalini experience and I've seen others having it. I never had it. But then you said, yeah, I had it a few times. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'm very curious.
So I practiced with this teacher called Clive Sheridan. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Greece,
no, we practiced with him. He was one of Mark's teachers. He's a tantric teacher, the white side of Tantra, very into the goddess worship. And we did, I don't know if he'd be comfortable talking about the details of his teaching because he likes being quite low-key. He's not on social media and he doesn't give a shit about all that.
Okay.
He's not on social media spouting wisdom, as you see a lot of other gurus doing. He's very, very low key. So
Underground.
very underground.
Mm.
And so, you know, he has this retreat in a jungle in Goa for 3 weeks where you're supposed to cut off from, you know, your phone and everything, and you're like in the jungle. And you do a lot of meditation, a lot of pranayam, a lot of hatha yoga, not ashtanga, and you have satsangs every day. It's a pretty strong schedule all day, and you're not distracted by your phone. There's a lot of silence and stuff like that. And I remember doing the pranayam. His pranayam is pretty strong, and I remember as I was doing the pranayam, I started shaking. And first I was thinking there's an earthquake happening because the shake was pretty strong coming from my hips. And then it was like my whole body was shaking. And then I started feeling my spine kind of arching a lot. And then I was like, what's going on? It was a very different feeling than I've ever had. It was really like not having control on your own body. And it's like something else is coming over and taking over, some other energy that you're not in control of. And at first I was a bit scared because I think I've always been a bit scared of losing control. So it was like very intense. And the more you try to control it and like hold your body stiff, like I don't want to have this, the more it gets intense. So after we finished the pranayam, I asked him about it, and he said that this is the Kundalini energy. And he said that he sensed that I've had this in me for a long time. And so over the next 3 weeks, there was a lot of these experiences. Quite a few other people started having those experiences around him, because I do feel, because he's so connected to the energy of Shakti, Ma, that he's like kind of transmits this without him really doing it on a conscious level. And it's also the pranayam. And so I started having a lot of these experiences. It was a bit uncomfortable, even though you feel like quite exhilarated at the same time, because, you know, you kind of start feeling this energy taking over. And then at night I would have a lot of dreams of snakes, and I've come from a very normal family. Like nobody in my family is into my family is like worships Lord Rama. So it's a very like kind of simple, there's no major Shakti things and none of this kind of stuff. So it doesn't come from there. Because I did question, I was like, was I subconsciously making this up, or what is this? I've never been like a Ma worshipper and like into like wanting Kundalini and all of this. So it was like quite radical for me, and I felt a bit uncomfortable. At the same time, you get really high on it. And at night I would have a lot of dreams, and I'd just start saying Ma, you know, out of the blue. So that continued for a while. You have to watch it though, that you don't get this spiritual ego. Because a part of you starts feeling, oh my God, I'm so special. I'm having these Kundalini experiences. But the thing, it happened for a long time. You know, from there on, for months, I was having these. Every time I just do my Ashtanga practice, I would start having this experience. Or if I heard temples, bells in India, like clang, you know, the sound of the temple bells, I'd start like having this vibration. So I got very sensitive. But when I questioned it, I was like, is this making me a better person? Not. It doesn't change who you are. However, what those experiences did was, in a very strong way, like how people talk about doing ayahuasca and stuff like this, and it heals a certain part of your experiences, the trauma. It did heal. I feel like it healed a bit of the trauma that I went through with my divorce. Like literally the memories that I had a lot of identification with, like I used to have deep identification with these memories. And on some deep cellular level, there was a feeling of being a victim, very, very subtle, that stuff, it literally got wiped out. I felt like it left my cells because I don't have those memories anymore. So it did do its work. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was like a medicine. But like with ayahuasca, you can't keep doing it, right? You have to do it like a medicine, and it's supposed to serve its purpose, because your nervous system can't handle that much energy. That's why actually being very grounded is very important. So when I see people teaching Kundalini stuff, I would be very careful, because, or even ayahuasca journeys, I feel there's a huge correlation. Even though it's a very different experience, because I have done ayahuasca as well in Brazil. It's a very different, completely different experience, and a different feeling, and totally different, but they are healing, but in the right dose. And if it's too much, it can just blow up your nervous system. So I feel like grounding is very important. And so, when I came back from Devas, and you told me this, just to walk on grass, because I was still feeling very shaky, and just walking on grass, and then having a salt water bath, and just eating a lot of grounding foods, focusing on like being grounded instead of getting high. That was something that I feel it has to be in balance with the Kundalini stuff, and your nervous system has to be very, very grounded to handle that.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of hype around Kundalini and getting that activation going. And I have heard other stories where it's been quite frightening. Like it can really, like you say, blow up your nervous system, and then you become ultra sensitive, and you can't not
function.
operate in the world because
dysfunctional.
there's so much influence from the electronic magnetic field and so forth, right? So grounding is super important.
And also working with a teacher, like that's one thing that I really trusted in Clive. And he was like there to support me through those experiences, and then I felt like I had the support after. But for sure, you need to have a very solid teacher. You need to be very solid in your nervous system. Ashtanga was good for me for that, because I felt like it's a very grounding practice, and it has a lot of stability, and it has structure. So I felt like even if it gives you that energy, it gives you a solid grounding. So, I've learned that now I want to have both. I want to have that spiritual passion, the spiritual energy, that however it manifests, whether it's just as an emotion, or whether it's in the real tangible energy in your body, or deep devotion to God. But I also want to be very, very grounded. Now I've realized you need it.
Don't get too high on the high.
And
but I mean, I would love to talk to you again about your Ashtanga journey. But then also, I know you've done a lot of interviews already with other people around that. So I think that, hearing your story, for me, it's been like an eye-opener as well. I didn't know all these things about you.
And I think that's why I love backbending. As I'm saying this to you, as I've been doing this whole conversation with you, like backbends, I do feel activate that energy. And I told you this, right? There was a book that I read. It was about the Kripalu Center. I can't remember the name of the book, but Amrit Desai, he talked about his experiences with Kundalini. And I do feel that backbends really activate that energy, because it's literally like a cobra going through your body.
But I have had several experiences where I've been going into the Kapotasana, and then all of a sudden you're just like not sure where you are anymore, like that sort of dissolving of oneself for that short little and that can be quite scary. Like it's like, oh, what happened? Where did I go? But I can see how that can come from the backbends. So we better be careful with those backbends.
I mean, they're also going to give you that high that nothing else can. That electricity.
No, for sure.
Which no leg behind the head or arm balances is going to give you.
So what is it that you feel today is your determination,
Mm.
and not so much in a challenging way, but maybe in an inspirational way. What is it that you feel now? This is where I see myself going forward, and this is now me, Bali hippie chick. I can walk around barefoot and wear whatever I
Yeah.
want.
I mean, I still have challenges in my life, and unfortunately, pain is what gives you depth. I do believe this. You know, when things are really happy and easy, we don't go into our depths.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like the moment you get into that pain or you have a challenge is where determination, your spiritual
Practice.
and also this kind of intensity gets amped up. So I do have still some deep challenges going on in my life, and I've made a resolution with those I have made a determination when those get resolved that I'm going to go on all these pilgrimages. So that's something that I'm working on. Maybe God just wants to keep me young, you know, keep having like passion and determination.
Yeah.
Not get too comfortable.
You are young.
So, you know,
what's the first pilgrimage you're gonna do?
When the challenges in my life get easier, then I'm going to go on them. It's got to do a lot with Lord Shiva because I'm a big Shiv devotee. So it's a lot of pilgrimages spot connected to him.
You don't have like one spot?
Yeah, there's Kedarnath. There's a bunch.
Okay.
There's one of them is Kedarnath, one is Kailash Mansarovar. There's a few that I've written down.
Okay, so you have a list.
Yeah. There's a list. But I like to keep it close to my heart for now.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
You know, like I want to keep
keep
the energy inside, and then when it manifests, then
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I used to think that I was a kid. Like if I talk too much about it, then it's not going to happen. I need to keep it quiet.
Yeah, you need to have the tunnel vision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you want to make something happen, you have to have tunnel vision.
Yeah. Well, my dear, I have really enjoyed
Me too.
this little chit chat. We could carry on for hours, of course. Girls. And I'm really looking forward to more chats, and of course we need to do a little promo for Deepika and Mark. You're teaching your intensives in
we're teaching in a few of them. So our first one is Feb, then we're going to do another in March, and then we're going to do a few more through the year.
Great.
Yeah.
And all this information is on your website?
Yeah, on Mark's website. Yeah.
markroberts.com.
Yeah.
Maybe?